When you're working on a project like this, there's a real temptation to just rip everything out the garden and start from scratch. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be a lot of stuff that I'm ripping out of this garden. But at the same time, plants are expensive and mature plants are really expensive. So there's no point in taking out stuff that doesn't need to be taken out. So today I'm going to go through some of the plants that I'm definitely going to be keeping, some of the ones that I'm definitely going to be getting rid of, and I'll take you through the garden plans as well, and we can hopefully work out how all of these mature plants that we can keep can fit in with the final design. Right, I'm going to start at this corner over here and we'll kind of work our way all the way around that side and then back up this side. And what I'm also going to do, which I'm not going to show on camera because it'll be a little bit boring, but I'm going to measure up where all of the plants are that we're going to be keeping so that I can transfer those onto the plans later on. So obviously the extension is going to be coming out the back here, and this kind of bit of wood lying across the ground shows how far it should be coming out. So obviously this tree here that's just kind of grown up from nowhere, this needs to go. I mean, it's growing into the next door neighbour's extension, and it's blocking all of the views of the garden, so that tree's going to have to go. This here, which is some sort of holly, and it's a shame, but again, I'm going to have to massively trim it back. That goes all the way back, if I climb under here, that goes all the way back to this beast here. And as you can see, it is quite a big plant, but it's further out than the extension. We could potentially trim it right back and keep it. I think what I'll probably do is give it a heavy prune and then make a decision a little bit later down the line. At the moment, that can stay temporarily, but it'll probably go. This giant birch tree, this obviously had to go. It was far too close to the property, nearly 3 foot wide at the base as well. Great big tree. Had a team on that for a day taking this out, and the apple tree further up, which I'll show you in a minute. But yeah, the great big birch had to go. It was massively shadowing the garden, and it was growing into both our house and the next door neighbour's house as well. So yeah, but all of that wood will become wood that I'll make stuff out of, and that will also obviously go on the fire. It needs a long time to dry out. And by the way, this is unbelievable. I mean, I can't move that, so I'm going to have to cut all that up before I can move it. But yeah, I did ask the tree surgeons to leave the wood, which they have done so. They've kind of vaguely chopped it up for us, which was very kind. But I did ask them to leave the big pieces because they would be getting use. This thing here, this can probably, obviously it needs tidied up. All of this loose kind of stuff needs to come out. And we've got brambles and all sorts. We'll talk about the brambles a bit later, but those brambles need to come out. This can be tidied up, but the main plant at the back there, I think can be left. I'm not sure what it is. We'll tidy it up and make a decision later down the line on that. That is all part of the same plant. Again, we've got a lot of brambles and things growing through here. Here, look at this. It's a giant rose bush here. So I'm just going to, again, I'll heavily prune it back and try my best to keep that, because that'll probably be quite a nice plant. Really old, and you can see there's more of it going all the way back there as well. So we'll keep the big rose. This tree at the back here, not so sure. I'll thin this out. This is all rose here. That'll all stay. That's coming on to, look at this. This is ancient, this rose bush. Huge, but that'll be beautiful once it's flowering. All of this kind of bushy stuff through the middle, all of this needs to come out. It's just use and ornament. I've no idea what it is, and it won't be hanging around long enough to find out what it is, because it'll all be getting chopped up and shredded. So even though it's just it's in the wrong place, basically. So even though, although this, whatever this is, that's starting to flower in the middle. Again, the problem with doing this in winter time, it's really quite tricky to identify what these are. They are just starting to bud, but yeah, I think we'll probably take all of this out. We don't really want a giant bush going across the middle here. Briefly mentioned before, the apple tree, the great big old apple tree that was here, is now gone. It was absolutely rotten, and it was also, as you can tell by what's left of it, it was smothered in ivy, and unfortunately ivy is a killer of trees. And if you've got nice trees and they've got ivy growing on them, then strip that ivy off as quickly as you can, because the ivy will destroy it. And that's what happened to this tree. Basically, it just got absolutely smothered by the ivy. And it was an old tree as well. You know, trees don't last forever. So it's had a good innings, this apple tree. I reckon this is probably a 40-year-old apple tree, maybe older. So it's had a pretty good innings. But yeah, time for that to go. I'll need to get a stump grinder to grind this out, because that is a beast of a stump down there. Heading back over here, I have been reliably informed that this is a lilac tree here. To be confirmed. Again, very hard to kind of identify in winter, but I'm definitely going to keep that. That's a beautiful tree, big tree actually, probably 30 foot high, I would have said, at a guess, 20 to 30, 25 foot high, I would have said. So, decent sized tree. Yeah, you can't buy stuff like this, so that'll be staying. And it's in a nice spot as well. Next door's got a lot of ivy climbing up over their outbuilding, which is very nice, but it will absolutely rot the wood. I will let them know about that. We've got a lot of ivy growing over this fence as well. Again, the ivy will eat the fence. Down here, again, giant rose bush here, but this has seen better days, so this will probably come out. We'll see. I'll heavily prune it and we'll see what it does. But I wouldn't be heartbroken if that is removed completely. Very old rose bush. Over here we've got a tree growing in the middle here. Again, not entirely sure what it is. It could be a little, don't know, it's got like a greenish bark to it. Very hard to say. What's this? This looks like some sort of pyracantha type thing with the oh no, pyracantha's evergreen, I think. It's, I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. Does anyone know? It's got great big spikes on it. But yeah, I'll probably get rid of that. Don't really want the spiky one, but we'll keep this tree that's coming up there. It's quite a nice ornamental, whatever it is. It'll look nice, and it's not in a bad location either, so we'll keep that, measure up where it is. Another old rose bush here in the middle. Great big one, look at it. Going all the way out there. It's probably 10 foot high, all the way up to the top. Big rose bush. Over here, all of this just needs cleared. It's just rubbish everywhere. Over here, we've got another apple tree. Now, this will probably stay for now. Again, it needs heavily pruned back, and all the ivy needs to be taken off it as well. But it looks like it's got potential to be quite a nice tree. The only problem is I've been reliably informed that the apples off these trees aren't particularly edible. They're not very nice apples. So we'll see. Again, we'll live with it for a bit. No huge rush to get rid of this. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what the apples are like, and if they're of no use, I mean, ornamental wise, it's quite a nice tree. Once all the like rough bits, once it's had a bit of a prune, I think it's quite a nice tree. But we'll see. If it ends up getting in the road, it will go a journey. Over here, I am planning on having a shed and a greenhouse at some point, so we'll have to make a little bit of room around this kind of area. We've got brambles absolutely everywhere here. Everywhere I'm walking is just a sea of brambles, which of course will turn into blackberries eventually. But what we do need to keep an eye on is where the sun shines and things like that. And well, in the winter the sun barely gets above kind of the horizon over there, and it kind of comes along and then sets over there. So in the winter time this is going to be permanently in shade, but in the summertime the sun rises over there, and it kind of goes all the way round, and it sets kind of over there-ish, I think, if I remember rightly. I'll show you that in a minute once we get on to looking at the plans and whatnot. So you don't really get the evening sun shining on the back of the house, but you do get the evening sun at the bottom of the garden, or at least we should. The reason this is critical for blackberries is because blackberries need sun for the blackberries to actually be nice, sweet blackberries. So if this is in a shaded area, then the blackberries will be awful and probably won't be worth keeping. But if this does get plenty sun, then the blackberries might be all right, so it might be worth keeping some of them. I mean, it needs massively trimmed back. It's just, we've got probably, 20 metres of blackberry bushes coming up here, and brambles, goes all the way down to the bottom there. So all of that needs thinned out. Nothing really here worth keeping, nothing to write home about. Temporary compost pile here. And then once we get down to the bottom here, we've got another little tree here covered in ivy. So I'll get all the ivy off that, give it a bit of a prune back. The tree itself can stay, it's not causing any problems. Again, another nice tree there covered in ivy. So I'll cut that ivy back. What I'll also do is I'll kill the ivy coming up this big tree, because that ivy, all I need to do really is cut it off at the bottom and it should naturally die back a little bit. But that tree, it's going to get killed by that ivy. It's going all the way up to the top of the tree. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, ivy, pretty though it is, that's going to kill that tree. This thing, it's a bit out in the summit, I don't know. We'll trim it back and we'll make a decision on that later. All of this is just rubbish, so all of that needs cleared down. We've got a tree at the bottom here, just a little tree, but that's actually in quite a good place. It's not shading anything, it shelters off the river area a little bit. Actually, no, I'll probably get rid of that one and keep the bigger one over to the left there. So we'll keep that. Again, ivy growing up that, I need to get rid of all that. Lots to trim back here. This tree at the corner can definitely stay. Great big birch by the looks of it, and probably about, again, 30, maybe 35 foot high birch there. And we've got another, I think these are all birch trees, I'm not sure, to the left of it here. I'll probably keep that. This spindly thing in the middle, I'm not convinced about keeping this. It's not particularly attractive plant. Again, we can make a decision on this sort of thing a little bit later down the line. It is just starting to bud, if you can see, if the camera focuses. So it's starting to bud. We're just very early January at the minute, so hard to tell on any of this sort of stuff. This thing here, what on earth is that? No idea. Don't know what it is. Again, probably just trim it back for now. And then coming up this side, we've got a great big laurel bush. I like laurel, so that'll be staying, but I will be shaping it a little bit just so that it's not encroaching on the garden quite so much. Obviously, whatever this is or was, some sort of compost heap needs to go, the shed needs to go. I need to sort out all these piles of rubbish everywhere. Around here, we've got some crocosmia growing at the bottom here. Crocosmia is lovely, and this'll, you can see the new buds are just starting to grow up. So I don't know, I think this is going to be where the office is going to be. I need to measure it out. Actually, it's not. No, the office is kind of up there. So they can potentially stay. Crocosmia are nice plants. I don't know what colour they'll be. Probably orange. Normally orange, but they might be yellow or red. Obviously needs trimmed back. In the middle of all this, we've got loads of glass that's just fallen out the shed, so I need to tidy all that up. Piles of bricks. They'll actually be used at the bottom of compost heaps, at the bottom of the log store, so I've got loads of places where I can put old bricks, so that's fine. We have got this great big, I can't remember what these are called, it's like a cypress or something like that, like evergreen hedge material, lovely, just needs trimmed back. That can stay. Very happy with that. I love those. I love the smell of it when it's cut as well. So all of that will stay. You'll let us know in the comments what that's called. Is it a cypress? I can't remember. Again, we've got another variant of it here. Great big version, but a slightly darker green version of it. But lovely evergreen, can be shaped quite well as well. Lots and lots of logs to chop up. I mean, these are all great. These are big logs. It's difficult to give you the scale of the amount of wood that we've got, but we have got a lot of wood that I need to sort out and build log stores and storage. All of this needs to be trimmed back and tidied up because this is where the office room is going to be. So all of this needs trimmed right back to the boundary. Might even put a fence along here, not sure. So all of that will, I mean, this can probably stay because it does give a little bit of kind of boundary material between us and next door. And then we're on to privet, a big privet hedge here that has never really been shaped properly over the years, and as a result it's growing a lot over this side. I'm not sure how much I can trim. It needs to be trimmed back by about a foot, and I'm not sure how far we can go before you start running out of buds, and therefore you'll just end up with a completely bare hedge. So we may end up having to rip all of this out and just put a fence in. I'd quite like to keep the privet if possible. Random holly growing in the middle of this, that'll come out. And then what have we got here? No idea. I'm not sure what that is. Whatever it is, it's probably going to come out. Not particularly attractive plant, and it's right in the middle. Well, I don't know. We might end up keeping bits of it. And then that's about it. Then coming up here, more privet hedge. As I say, let us know in the comments how far you can trim back a privet, but I think you need to trim it to where it's budding. And I mean, we've got, is that a bud? Let's say, I don't think it is. Okay, we'll decide about that later down the line. I'm tempted to just take this out and put a fence along this bit. We've got this here. It's another spiky plant. As I say, it's spikes similar to a pyracantha, but pyracantha generally keeps its leaves over winter, so I don't think it is pyracantha. But let me know in the comments if you know what that is. Very spiky tree. I might make the decision on that later down the line. It is quite close to the extension, but we'll prune it back. And then coming up here, more hedge. All of this will come out because there's where the extension ends. And that is it in a nutshell. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to measure up where all the big plants are, and let's have a look at the plans for what we're going to be doing with this garden, hopefully. A little tip when you're working on a project like this, it can be a right pain measuring up where plants are, especially in a big garden. So if you need to map out a garden like this, what I like to do is mark regular intervals in the garden just using bricks, and in this example I'm measuring them every 5 meters, so every 5 meters I've got a brick. And then it makes it much easier to work out where the plants are in reference to those bricks that are on the ground, and you don't have to keep on getting the tape measure out. And you don't need to be millimetre accurate with this sort of stuff. You can just wander around, use the bricks spaced at the regular intervals as a reference point, and from that you can work out where everything is. And when all of that is translated over onto the plans, this is roughly what we've got in terms of the bigger trees and bushes and things in the garden that we want to keep. Please do not judge the graphics. I've just done it very simply, and I'm using a very old version of SketchUp that doesn't have plants and things in, but it does the job. It's enough to kind of get a vague idea of where everything is. And by complete coincidence, we'd actually come up with this garden plan before working out where all the plants are, and actually it works pretty well. I think the garden design as we've got it will be absolutely fine, and there's nothing really to change. I thought that there might be the odd tree that would end up in the middle of a path or something like that, but no, everything's fine. The only thing that really I need to do is get rid of that stump from the apple tree, because it's directly underneath where the office is going to be. And as I say, I'm going to talk about the office in a future episode, because that's quite a big topic in its own right. But this is our first draft kind of garden plan, and let me tell you a couple of things about this first so that it makes sense. First of all, this grid over on the left, it's just for scale, more for myself than anything else. Each one of these squares is the size of the garden that we had on our new build that we were living in. So, I mean, I know our new build didn't have a particularly big garden, but it just gives us an idea of what we're dealing with here. The garden in our 1920s house is 16 times bigger, technically a little bit bigger because that doesn't even cater for the extension. You know, the extension on its own would almost make it 18 times bigger, but for argument's sake, let's just say 16 times bigger than our new build garden, which is great. The other thing I want to show you over on the right hand side here is where the sun rises and sets. So we've got midsummer sun and midwinter sun, and it rises on the yellow line and sets on the blue line. So in the winter, basically it rises kind of over here, barely gets above the horizon, and then sets somewhere kind of over here. But in the summertime, it's going to rise towards the end of the garden there, shining towards the back of the house, so we'll get the morning sun, and it's going to track all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, and set somewhere kind of over here-ish. So it should be fairly safe to say that we're going to get the evening sun down the bottom of the garden, which is really perfect for a garden like this, because it means that we can sit near the river, enjoy the views, and catch a few evening rays at the same time. So all of this impacts how the garden needs to be designed. And why are we that bothered about the garden design at this stage? Because bearing in mind, we're not going to be doing any work on the garden for a long time. We've got a lot of other more important things to do first. Well, the main reason is because it impacts things like where the office is going to go. I need to build a shed to keep just gardening tools and things like that, so it impacts where the shed's going to go. And of course, it impacts things like where compost heaps and a log store, I need to build all those sort of things, and it impacts where that's going to go. I don't want to build a compost heap exactly where we want to be sitting in the garden, for example. So yeah, so basically northeast, that way towards the river, and southwest towards the house. But this is the direction the sun is going to take, from the yellow line all the way around to the blue line. And as I say, in wintertime, barely gets above the horizon, but you do get a little bit of sun towards the bottom of the garden there in winter, which is kind of nice. So we've settled on the office going kind of here-ish. The reason for it going there is because if it's any closer to the house, it's going to massively block views from the back of the house. And the other thing is that potentially, along with it being an office, it's also going to be where my drums are going to live. And this is going to be a soundproofed, completely soundproofed building built under permitted development. And yeah, we just don't want it being too close to the house for that reason. At the same time, for the reasons that I've explained in the previous video, I don't want it being too close to the river, just because I want to kind of mitigate any obvious risks in case there are any floods or anything like that, but we should be fine. We do want a little bit of a lawn area just to, you know, chill out and have somewhere for the trampoline. A couple of people have said, like, oh, why have you got a trampoline, or put the trampoline further away from the house? Well, I want it to be easy for our daughter to get to the trampoline, so I don't want it being too far away from the house. We've probably only got a couple of years, and then she'll not be interested in using it anymore, and it'll go a journey. So as long as we've got it, we'll have it somewhere convenient, and up here seems good enough. Vaguely shown the trees. This little yellow thing is a stump that I might try and grind out, or I might just leave it as some sort of feature in the garden. I'm not sure, I haven't quite decided on that. This is the lilac tree that we talked about, rose bush over here that we talked about, and I think it was some sort of birch thing growing in the middle here. Again, absolutely fine. The little brown areas are going to be veg plots, so we're thinking of having one veg plot over on this side, and then another veg plot, a bigger veg plot over on this side here. A seating area halfway down the garden, just so you don't have to walk too far to get to a seating area. I mean, of course, there will be some form of seating area at the top of the garden up here as well, just directly outside the bifolds, but we do want something. Obviously this area isn't going to get much sun, so we do want something a bit further down as well. This little box thing here will be some sort of log store of some description. As I say, patio area here. These little green boxes against the fence are just to kind of vaguely illustrate where brambles might be kept. So blackberries and that sort of thing. We need to work, I would like raspberry bushes as well somewhere. Again, we'll work that out once we're actually living in the property. I'm generally a great believer in doing as little as possible until you've lived in the property for at least a year, so you can get a handle on where the sun's going to be shining and how you use the space and that sort of thing. But as I say, there's certain things I need to get done now, like the office, the shed, compost heaps and all that. I don't particularly want to have to move them later down the line. Talking of which, so once we've got past this little bunch of bushes here, greenhouse will probably go here, then a shed just at the bottom here, more brambles, and then a seating area down towards the river at the bottom here. I've pretty much settled on shoving the compost heaps at the bottom here. We're going to need compost heaps. Honestly, any garden needs a compost heap. In my view, it's a free way of dealing with your garden waste, and it gives you soil for free at the end of it, so why not have one? Ideally have two compost heaps, so you can have one live one and one kind of festering one that you'll leave sorting itself out, and then you can use the soil out of it the following year, if that makes sense. Anyway, we're going to need pretty big compost heaps for a garden of this size, so we're going to shove them down this bottom side here. They're far enough away from the seating area not to cause any kind of problem. Not that a properly managed compost heap doesn't smell. They smell quite nice. They just kind of smell of soil. That's another whole topic for another day. I don't want this turning into too much of a gardening channel. The other thing to bear in mind as well is that there's all this kind of area down the bottom here as well, but yeah, we'll probably leave this, maybe deck it at some point. I'm not sure. We'll see. That's jury's out on this bit down the bottom here. We need somewhere to shove the crazy amount of logs and wood and stuff that we've got. Again, I don't particularly want to be moving all this stuff later down the line, so the log store, a temporary log store of wet wood, is probably going to go here. We'll cover it in some sort of way so it does start to dry out, but that's not going to be finished wood for burning. Finished wood for burning will live kind of up towards the house in this log store here. So that's once it's all chopped up and kind of, well, ready to sit drying out for a year before it gets used on the fire. But I need somewhere to temporarily chuck all of the crazy amounts of wood that we've got that need to be chopped up, and everything that needs to be done with wood, basically. We've then got the great big laurel bush that we talked about, and whatever that other one was, a cypress or whatever it is. So they just need to be tidied up, as we mentioned before. Great big vegetable plot here, window at the bottom of the office overlooking the bottom of the garden. I think that should work really nicely. A couple of people asking why there's not many windows in this office, and it is for soundproofing. It's predominantly, we want it to be as soundproof as possible. So yeah, long story, we'll talk about that in a separate video. The only thing on here that's going to be set in stone is going to be the office location, because obviously once that's built, we can't move it. Everything else we can potentially move around, but I think this layout's going to work pretty well. Ideally, once the shed's built, I don't particularly want to move it, and once the compost heap and logs are in their kind of resting places, I don't particularly want to move all that stuff again. So I think that's a pretty good location for all that kind of stuff. Everything else, where the paths run, where the grass is, even where the veg plots are to a degree, they can all be fairly flexible, because I'm not going to have time to do any of that for quite a long time. So yeah, there we go. Let us know in the comments what you think of this garden layout. I think it's going to work pretty well. I'm bound to have forgotten something, but as I say, I think the main thing is to kind of live with it for a bit. The main thing is that we've got good locations for the things that we don't particularly want to be moving, but everything else, as I say, can be fairly fluid. That's it for today, folks. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, then please do so. I shall see you next time. Tatty bye!